Another is that I would sketch out kind of motifs. I like individual sort of sketches I've done of like Botany Bay, or even just illustrative looking designs. I'll perhaps do lots and lots of those, and then I will piece those together into a pattern.
Hi, I'm Beth Beesky, the founder of More Time to Design and your host of the Design Dialogues podcast. I've been a designer for the last 12 years and I've run my own studio for 5, and I know how hard it is to run a successful business. You not only need to be great at designing, but you need to be great at all the other things as well. I created More Time to Design, a software platform to help designers run efficient studios, and I've created the Design Dialogue podcast to help us all learn together. Each week, we will meet professionals who are at the top of their game doing things that help us run our studios. We'll have conversations with social media managers, interior design mentors, copywriters, stylists, photographers, suppliers, and also designers who have been in the game for a long time and who have such a wealth of knowledge to share. I hope that each week you feel inspired and informed at the end of each of our design dialogues. So join me for the Design Dialogue podcast. Welcome to episode 20 of the Design Dialogues podcast. This week I am talking with Adam Jones from Quercus and Co. I loved this dialogue with Adam. I learnt so much about how a wallpaper company works and the process that Adam goes through for all of his collections. It was such a joy to hear from Adam, who is a true craftsman. This episode is the second in our 2-part series, talking to both Kate Nixon and Adam about their new collaboration of wallpapers and fabrics. If you haven't heard my chat with Kate in last week's episode, make sure to go and check it out. If you haven't already seen the beautiful collaboration from Kate and Adam, please do go and check it out on the socials or in the flesh at the Elliott Clark showrooms around Australia. One thing that I did also want to call out is Adam and Quercus and Co were victims of the dreaded Instagram account being shut down just a few months ago. And I know it would mean the world to Adam and the team at Quercus & Co if you could go and give them a follow over on their Instagram account. I know many of you will have been through this or have friends who have been through this. I have been through this personally with my Instagram account being shut down for no particular reason about 12 months ago, and it is so frustrating. So yeah, I'd really love it if you could go and show Adam and the team some support by just going and following their Instagram account. You will of course get to see some of their beautiful designs and your feed will be full of inspiration. Also, as always, if you are enjoying the podcast, I would love for you to leave a review. Reviews are one of the best ways for people to find the podcast. If you are unsure of how to leave a review, I will put in the show notes some simple instructions to follow. I really do appreciate you taking the time to leave a review. I really hope you enjoy my dialogue with Adam Jones. Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Design Dialogues podcast. I am really looking forward to my dialogue today with Adam Jones from Quercus and Co. Hi Adam, how are you?
Hi Beth, lovely to meet you. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a pleasure. As I said, I'm really looking forward to it. So I love to start each of our dialogues with finding out what can you see out your window today?
Well, this is going to be really boring because I'm in a little study nook. I'm actually at home this morning because it's too noisy in the studio. And although I've got glass bricks that look out into a hallway, so that I'm nicely lit, but unfortunately there's nothing out of the window. And it's a beautiful sunny day outside. I know that.
It is.
Yes, yeah. It's all in my head.
Very good, very good. So just before we started we hit record, I was saying how people say to me, you are crazy for starting a software company. But I think starting a wallpaper company is up there in the levels of crazy. So I would love to know, how did it come about that you started a wallpaper business?
Yes.
And for those who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about what Quercus and Co is and kind of the evolution of the brand? Because I know that you celebrated 10 years last year, which is such an achievement in business. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yes. So at Quercus and Co, we design and print wallpaper and both fabric for interiors. We print all of our own designs in-house, and we sell them to the trade through showrooms in Australia and in the US. Most of our sales are to the US market, which is incredible. We also print wallpaper and fabric for other pattern designers, Australian pattern designers too, who sell through the same channels. We're all like boutique, micro batch is the kind of terminology. Companies and I guess in the same way that this has grown in regards to sort of breweries and all of these odd little quirky small businesses, up alongside this, pattern designers joined the gang. But how Quercus and Co started, well, it was actually a really long time coming. I mean, I grew up in the 70s, so I was surrounded by, pattern, everything in our house, like most people. It was like the ceiling, the curtains, the floor, the carpet, the dadded, wood grained, all of the timber, and so I was surrounded by pattern, and I kind of have really strong memories of that heyday, I guess, in terms of the pattern for interiors. Going to art school, all of those things, I was always very focused on being some kind of artist or creative. But I found myself at one point back in London. I'd been traveling and needed a job. A friend said, come and work in this paint and decorating shop, which I reluctantly did, but found that I really loved it. I loved mixing all of the paint colors. It would have been in the late 80s, I guess. And I loved, speaking to the customers. Many of them it was in Clapham. So many of them were interior designers and decorators. And, but I particularly loved the wallpaper books on the back shelf, which not very many people were kind of paid much attention to. But I was kind of thinking, who does this? I was thinking, who does, how do you do this? So the seed had been sown at that sort of early point. I was back in Australia. I'd done various jobs. I worked for Portis Paints for quite some time. And the owner, Peter Lewis, asked me to design their first range of wallpaper, which I did, and it's still available now. Actually,
I reckon I've specified some of those.
There's like a dandelion, there's a beetle, there's a Banksia. There's sort of large scale kind of engraving style.
They're so iconic, those prints.
Still available. So that was lots of fun. He knew I had an interest in wallpaper, but and I did in fact write a business plan to start a wallpaper business, but it just seemed insurmountable. I thought, well, I would have to do screen printing or block printing. I was trying out all these things, and I thought, how am I going to do this? At a later date, he asked me again to design another range based on seaweed patterns, and I kept drawing them, and he would come to me and say, no, they're not quite right. And he was right, they weren't quite right. Even though it was challenging for me to hear.
A true creative.
But he was pointing at like illustrations that were done in watercolor, and I was saying, you with your kind of equipment, which is this beautiful old-fashioned kind of printing press, you can't print like that. It would have to be done in digitally. And digital at that point was sort of a dirty word, really. I mean, it was even before digital photography. But something, it was sown in my head, and my partner said, why don't you look into that? Why don't you think about doing digital printing? so off I go to sort of trade shows and, you know, overwhelmed by the technology, and basically bought a printer and started, sort of jumped off the cliff and thought, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
So that
and the
was
way all good businesses start.
I know, and I to be honest, I would not go back to that time if you paid me, because you know, it's such a sort of challenge to sort of you know, I had a printer, I had paper,
Yep.
I didn't have clients, I didn't have designs.
Yeah.
So I actually to force myself down the road, I booked a stand at Design X, which was the big trade show at that time.
Yeah.
And I had like 6 months, or a few months anyway. I thought, well, that's plenty of time. Oh my God, the pressure was on. Everything went wrong that you could possibly imagine. Like about a week before the show, I left a metal ruler in the printer, which smashed the print head. So that $6,000 sort of repair. But the paper that I was releasing a collection on had been discontinued when I went to get more of it. So I had to print it on this horrible, shiny kind of stock and display that, knowing like just feeling so bad that I was when you know, the thing is, when you start out, you know what
it could be,
and you can't do it, and it's like you just have to hope people have got short memories, and keep moving forward, because that, if anything, that's certainly a lesson, is that you just can't look back. You've got to just keep
going.
You know it's not good enough, but what can you do?
Yeah. So there's two things that I'd love to come back to from that. So the first is the paper. So because I think sometimes when people think of digital printing, at least in the early days, as you said, it was shiny, it was like almost like plastic, like it was not good.
Yeah.
But you were really looking for almost like a very traditional style paper, so that you could get that feeling of beautiful kind of traditional wallpaper, but using this new technology. Yes.
So very much so. And it was quite hard to sort of track down that kind of paper, certainly. And now there are plenty of options, but I actually put a notice on LinkedIn, funny enough, and got a response from looking for paper. You know, got a response from a US company, and so that we're launching a new paper at that time. So that, in fact, has been the paper right up until today, or to now, but we're about to change over to a new one, which is just as beautiful, or more beautiful in some ways. It throughout the, you know, COVID price increases, you know, it's been challenging, and that company has sold a few times, so we've had lots of issues. So there's always something going on, isn't there?
Always something.
But the paper is really important. Essentially, digital printing is ink on paper, so it's literally the same as any other printing process. Essentially, it's about a technique that you have, how you work with that to kind of create your you know, your artwork in many ways. That's really beautiful. It shows that it's an artist. Like, it's not just any roll of wallpaper. Like, there's a real kind of thought going into it. Yes.
The other thing that I would love to kind of come back to and get your thoughts on, so you obviously have an English background, and I was recently talking to a designer who she spent 5 or so years working in England, and she loves color, and how much over in Europe and the UK, things like wallpaper and pattern and color and fabric it's just used in such a different way to how we do it here. Partly, you know, we were saying how there's so many, especially in somewhere like London, where there's, you know, you've got lots of little row houses, and you can't really change much of the exterior, and you can't really change much of the layout due to heritage restrictions and all this kind of stuff. So people really kind of express but they make them their own through wallpaper and fabric. Here in Australia, we I think we're getting a lot better at using wallpaper, but it's very different. Like people, we still don't really embrace color that much. There's some amazing designers that do it so well, but I would say they're kind of the outliers rather than the norm. How do you feel as an Australian kind of demographic? Like, it's interesting you said that a lot of your sales are into the US, which I think are quite similar. I would say they're similar, more similar to the UK market than ours. How do you find that we embrace wallpaper? Has that really affected the designs you've put together?
It's so I've been here since the early 90s, so many years, and so I sort of do consider myself sort of Australian, and have a sort of you know, I feel like I have a kind of English but / Australian sort of aesthetic, and in some ways that was part of the challenge, is, you know, in the early days, knowing that I loved wallpaper but thinking, how does it fit in here, who's going to buy it, you know, and you know, I've had to sort of in some ways put that aside, but and just focus on what I like and what I love. I particularly I guess we're in the early days or so, when wallpaper was started to come back into fashion, it was much more about a statement, big, bold kind of graphics in the early 2000s. And it was, I guess, a bit like a feature, so much more of a feature. And now we've kind of moved on past that, and small scale patterns are being used so much more. And it's much more about a textural kind of layering to a room, and for me, wallpaper kind of wraps around your sort of furniture, your artwork, your doors and windows, and it sort of creates so much mood and feeling. And you work with really soft, subtle patterns and colors, and it just softens spaces. I love seeing how that sort of fashion with wallpaper is now coming much more into its own. So it just becomes another textural kind of element in amongst many other things, as opposed to being a huge feature, which can look fabulous in the right place. Absolutely. But wallpaper, it looks wonderful in like small bathrooms, powder rooms, hallways, you know, where you catch kind of your eye. It doesn't have to be in the whole living room. It could look great on ceilings if it were to suit that sort of space.
It is. I mean, it's such a beautiful element. Like, I loved how you described it, how it kind of wraps up the room. Like, it really does. Like, it's that extra level and layer in a beautiful kind of finished interior. And I know with my own clients, like when I bring in wallpaper, it really does elevate the space. And it doesn't, as you said, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a pattern. It can be a texture or something like that. Like, it's really beautiful. And I know some of my clients are like, love it. Some of them are like, wallpaper, like that's what my grandma had in the 70s. Like, and you know, I think they've got flashbacks of like lime green and orange. But yeah, it's such a beautiful element to have in an interior. And I think like the Australian community, like we are getting better at seeing it and it being used. And it's not that, oh my goodness, like just a feature wall. You know, it's kind of like we moved on from feature paint finishes to feature wallpaper. Like, I think we've matured a little bit in that, which is good. I mean, we all love a wallpapered powder room these days. So
yes, I know. And I think in choosing the right pattern, I mean, you can go for something kind of very simple, of course, that does bring in a textural element, but it's also an opportunity to express yourself or the client, of course. And I think it's like art, you know, if you fall in love with something, you really have to love it, and it grows with you. I know if if you or any of your listeners buy small pieces of art, or you bought them many years ago, you cherish them. Those are the things you carry around with you, and you put them up in a new spot, and you kind of like, you know, we all love our artwork, and I think we have to see wallpaper in the same way as that.
Yeah.
When it's going to be more of a feature pattern, you know, it can be so playful, and you can have lots of fun and kind of and character with it. And there are so many, I mean, there's so many fantastic Australian designers. I'd love to see more sort of more of them known in many ways, because I know who they are. And because and it's interesting that the US they love Australian design. They love that. So many of us are represented by the US showrooms, and we all do really well. And they look to Australia with kind of you know, great respect in terms of sort of our in terms of pattern design in this instance. Whereas the UK doesn't. So even though I'm English, they're very focused on their own British made.
Yes.
Of course, they've got a huge history and they've got amazing designers there doing their own thing, but they don't necessarily regard Australia as being kind of the place to go to for wallpaper.
But they're lost. They're lost. Now, I would love to hear about, like, how do you start the process of bringing together a new collection? Like, how do you, like, I suppose, where do you get the inspiration from? And then does it go through, I imagine it goes through a whole lot of technical processes to work out, is this actually going to be feasible? And like, how long does that take? Like, how do you bring a collection together?
Well, I've got heaps of ideas. I'm never short of ideas. I can kind of my problem is editing them in many ways, and and knowing which one to sort of explore and which one is going to work, what's the mood or the feeling, where to go with certain designs. But there are probably 3 different methods, I guess, and in which I kind of develop designs. I'm very much into mark making. I love ink and paper, and I love how sort of paint sits on the surface of paper or soaks in, and the blots. And if anyone is familiar with our designs, you'll see that I sort of like to sort of play around with those washy or textural elements. So one method would be experimenting with mark making and blobs and, you know, dashes and all of those things. And from that, I would then create patterns from them. Another is that I would sketch out kind of motifs. I like individual sort of sketches I've done of like Botany Bay, or even just, you know, illustrative looking designs. I'll perhaps do lots and lots of those, and then I will piece those together into a pattern like later, and see how they fall into sort of a nice repeat. Another method would be, I will probably wake up in the middle of the night with an actual design in my head, very much a preconceived sort of, that's how I want it to look. And I will then perhaps mock up and kind of collage or grab things and create the design how I imagine it before starting to paint it. So then I would, like, everything's hand painted, but then I would have an idea of how the repeat is going to work before I even pick up a brush. So that all of these in some ways works together as well. I mean, there's a whole mixture, but many designs don't cut it. You know, I can finish the pattern exactly how I perhaps would have liked or envisaged it, and it just doesn't work. You know, so it's a very, very long process, to be honest. And
and at what point do you start to go, this is a really beautiful pattern and it's a beautiful wallpaper, but commercially it's not going to work? Like, does that come into it at some point?
You have to kind of, the thing is, you really have to take something to almost a finished point, which is why it's so time consuming to sort of then print it up large and look at it and you think, yeah, it's okay, you know, it's like it's fun or it's dramatic or it's not gonna, I don't, you know, this is where you know, the edit comes in some ways. It's kind of that I get carried away and can do something I love, but it doesn't always, you've got to pull back and think,
translate.
is it going to fit? Or is it the right time? I mean, there are designs that I could perhaps bring out at a later date, or I revisit and then in terms of a collection, once I pulled perhaps a couple of things together, then I start to see other patterns that could accompany them, and you can sort of put together a few things that and you play with the color. And then you were also working on a story, because I really like collections to have some kind of a story. And a feeling, that's it, because I think designs have to have a feeling, feel good.
And so does the story come first, or is it that you're kind of constantly working on these patterns and then over time you see
it's a bit of both.
Wow.
With the Tsukechi collection, Tsukechi is a Japanese word for sketch, that I made that collection in around the time of the whole Brexit and the Trump and all of this kind of like world stuff that at the time seemed quite dramatic. This is all, of course, pre-COVID. But I was thinking,
little did we know,
it seemed kind of like odd doing patterns when there was like a little bit of turmoil in the world. I am kind of conscious of those things, but I kind of embraced that. So that's where patterns like Tempest, because it felt like something, something whirly water would be a nice feeling, because it somehow it kind of but also I had Halcyon, which is little dainty clouds floating in the sky, Starlit, which is the cranes flying across a starlit night, which is very hopeful and kind of so I was very much working on feelings for that collection. We've got Cloudburst, which is kind of like a depiction of rain, drenching a sort of your windows and just running down. And so those patterns are kind of expressive in many ways, and they did come around. The mood of them was first.
Wow, such a beautiful. And I think as designers, like, I love hearing those stories, because I think then to take that into your interiors and kind of like, I think it just gives the story so much more kind of thing, like to know, the background of, it's not just a mark on a piece of paper, or there's a real kind of story behind it. I think that's so beautiful. And then tell me a little bit about, like, because you print all your paper here in Sydney, don't you?
Yes.
And your fabric, is that right?
Yes.
So how does that work? Like, in this world of mass everything, how do you create these beautiful little, as you said, micro batches of wallpaper?
Well, I like control, so I like to be I like to see the whole production through right to the end, because I like to sort of play with how it's going to end up looking. And so I would struggle a little bit if I was sending them off to be printed by someone else. We were having our fabric printed by another company for quite a few years. I didn't start the business with fabric in mind. That sort of came later, because it was obviously a kind of a perfect companion. But again, through the whole COVID thing, we thought, let's just do this in-house, kind of, let's take more control over it. We'll have on supply issues and all of those things. So we print the fabric onto Belgian linen. We buy it directly from the mill in Belgium. And that was a big learning curve, but it's essentially, again, it is just sort of printing. And if you get all of the specs right, you get the fixation and the kind of all of the detail that the designers need in place, then and we take orders from like 1 yard or 1 meter right up to sort of hundreds of meters. And it's amazing. So it sort of works smoothly in the most part.
I think that's amazing. I imagine, your wallpaper getting printed in it's St. Peter's, isn't it, where your factory is?
But actually, no, we're in Banks Meadow.
Banks Meadow.
We were in St. Peter's, yeah.
But that wallpaper being printed here in Banks Meadow and going, to the States and getting hung on the walls in New York and America. I just think that's amazing. I think you must be really chuffed, like from starting.
It's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really very cool.
To see where it ends up, absolutely, is kind of like thrilling, really, and to see it be used in some really stunning homes. I love making tools. So it's like, I'm not an interior designer, but I love providing someone else with the tools that I call them to do their magic with, and so I love seeing how they take it and turn it into something special.
It's really lovely. It's really lovely. And so talk to me a little bit about, you've got a new collaboration coming out with Kate Nixon, talking about interior designers and giving us tools. Kate is creating some beautiful, oh my gosh, such stunning spaces. How has it been working with Kate, bringing that collection to life?
Yeah. So late last year, we held a few showroom walkthroughs, I guess, or we opened the doors to our showroom. We invited stylists and art editors, magazines, etc., to come and look at what we do and see the sort of all of the processes. Kate attended one of the events, and that's how we met. And she was, I think, very excited to see the process of how we take, hand-drawn hand drawings right through to sort of finished products, and also selling them. And we started chatting about a collaboration. I mean, Kate is such a beautiful person. Anyone who knows her sort of, she sort of emanates kind of like calm and kind of elegance, and exactly like her interiors. And so it was, that was a big part of the draw card for me, is that she's such a sort of gorgeous woman, and her designs are so amazing. So it's as a collaboration, it's I've never done it before, and it's challenging. Absolutely. It's absolutely,
because it sounds so different in a way from what your normal process is, like that we were just talking about, which seems very, very organic and free flowing, and what comes, and it's a real journey to bring those collections together, where working with Kate has obviously been a little bit more structured and a bit more kind of like I suppose Kate's vision has very much been coming to life.
Yes. So Kate engaged us to design the patterns for her. She directed exactly what she how she wanted them to look. She gave us sort of reference material, and we that was quite a close kind of engagement, and it's definitely something I've never done before. It did push but it pushed me to do better work. It's absolutely, because how do I do that? How do I kind of
and I think that's what all good collaborations do. Like collaborations, well, I think the ones that work well are the ones where like it's the meeting of minds and the meeting of skills, but generally there's you're pushing because like one person might not have the technical skills, and they're like, but can't we do this? And the technical person's like, oh, that's really like, that's going to really push us. But then you're like, let's just give it a go. So I think all good collaborations, the outcome is that both people have a greater understanding of how the other person does what they do, but also usually you learn so much. You go, oh, actually we can push the process this far and all this kind of stuff. So for sure. So it's taught me a few things, and I think we're both really happy with the finished results. We love them, and we've just finished a photo shoot over the last week together, and it's fascinating for me to see
how she knows as much about the designs as I do, and she loves them as much as I do, and she has this ownership over them.
Yeah.
In a kind of you know, in the same way I do. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that feeling. I love the excitement, sharing that excitement
Yeah.
and the journey.
Yeah, so I suppose having that shared as well, love and joy, and it's, you know, I think quite often as a creative, it can feel a bit lonely, like in that process of like building an interiors or a collection. To have someone to share that kind of with is really lovely.
Yes, yeah. It's kind of an unexpected sort of pleasure, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. And is that collection wallpaper and fabric?
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome.
So 28 wallpapers and 28 fabric. So it's quite a chunky collection. Seven different designs.
Yeah.
And they look beautifully. They work beautifully together.
Yeah.
I really can't wait to see how people respond to them.
Oh, awesome. Well, we will definitely put them on our Instagram so all of our listeners can see them as well.
Fantastic.
So I'd love to now pick your brains a little bit in terms of the technical side of wallpaper. So as a designer, what are some of the things people should consider when they're looking at wallpaper for their projects? Because I know sometimes a wallpaper can be beautiful, but it might not be right in terms of like the technical nature of it. What are some of the things that you think designers should think about when they're specifying a wallpaper, other than how pretty it is?
Yes. Well, clearly, if they're using it in a bathroom or a light commercial project, it would need to sort of fit those specs. Most wallpapers do, in fact, and but I guess technically there isn't a great deal to consider.
Yeah.
It does all come down to color and pattern. There are many different types of sort of paper and types of designers who use different papers or grass cloth or kind of textures, that kind of thing. It obviously the walls or the condition of the walls would play a part in that. So if you had a sort of rough wall or an old house or a wonky place, those things would need to be checked out by the installer to sort of propose either lining the walls or creating another finish for the wallpaper to go onto. But modern wallpapers now are very easy to remove. Basically, it's called non-woven, so they're kind of rip resistant, I guess, and you can pull them all off quite easily. So it's not, you're not really engaged in all of that, how to remove it if you change your mind.
I suppose one of the things that I've learned from using wallpaper in my projects is actually the relationship you have with the installer, because not all installers are made equal.
No, that would be true. Yes.
And so I suppose more so than even the paper that you choose, making sure you choose an installer that knows what they're doing.
Yes. So our paper is untrimmed. In other words, it's called double cut installation. So it's got the white sort of edges. You receive it with the white edges. That's a really simple technique for a good installer to do. They often prefer it, or they really like it because they can get a perfect sort of join. But an inexperienced painter, or when I say painter, an inexperienced decorator, sometimes they're a painter who says, yes, I can do that for you. I would sort of be quite wary about that. And if anyone sort of brings that up, like any installer brings that up saying, oh, I'm not sure about this, then tread carefully, because it is their responsibility. If they mess it up, it's like their fault, really. So try and find a good installer, and good installers don't have any problem with that technique.
Awesome.
And wallpaper isn't cheap, on the most part. So pay for a good installer to get the best results.
Definitely. And yeah, I can definitely vouch for the fact that a good installer makes the whole thing a lot easier.
Yeah, yes, for sure.
So I'd love to know, what are you looking forward to in your business in the next 12 months? You've obviously got all of this exciting stuff with Kate coming up, but
Yes.
what else are you looking forward to?
That's certainly top of the list. And I've also been prepping for a kind of a YouTube video series where I will personally be, giving sort of backstories to the business, talking about color and design, how patterns are made, a whole kind of array of different sort of insider videos, which
Awesome.
we're planning, and I've already had a voice coaching lesson, which isn't clearly having any effect right now, but we'll see how it all pans out.
That's really lovely. I think I love seeing how things are done, like the backstory. Like, I could listen to you talk about the process for days. I think it really helps designers love the product, that then helps their clients love the product. Like, I think the relationship between a designer and a maker, I think is such an important one. And I think when you know the inspiration or the process, like it really just it makes the whole thing so much a nicer experience for everyone.
Yes, and it's something that I like to share. I have no problem sharing anything that I do. I don't see these things as sort of confidential, because if anyone is willing to have a go, then please have a go. And do what you do with it, because it's kind of a pleasure sort of sharing my knowledge or experience if it can help someone else do it their own way.
Oh, awesome. Well, I will definitely be looking out for that YouTube series. And how can our community reach out to you?
So in Australia, we sell through Elliott Clark. They have showrooms in all of the major cities. Of course, they can come direct to us, but all of the sales and orders go through Elliott Clark. In the US, there are various showrooms that are all on our website, in New York, Austin, LA, etc.
Awesome. And we will link to all of that in our show notes. Adam, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. It's my pleasure too.
I hope you enjoyed this dialogue with Adam. I learned so much, so I hope you did as well. One of the things that I loved hearing about was how working with Kate for their collaboration made Adam work a bit differently, and kind of that combination of the creative, two kind of creative minds coming together to really kind of push the boundaries of what was possible. And I loved hearing about how that was a really positive process for Adam and not something that was a negative. I love this because I think it is such a great thing to keep in mind when you are working with other people in our industry, whether it be a builder or another supplier. Sometimes just because we are used to doing something a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't another way to do it or a better way to do it, or just ways to kind of, stretch the boundaries a little bit. So often these partnerships are when the real magic happens. I hope you enjoyed this dialogue with Adam. I will see you next week for our next design dialogue. It is usually around this time of the year that we all start to think about what we are doing in our businesses, and maybe some things we might like to do a little differently. I am sure a lot of you who are listening are currently trying to wrap up projects before the end of the year, and so thinking about a new software platform is at the bottom of the to-do list. However, if you can spare a few minutes, the team and I would love to show you how more time to design can transform your business and mean that 2024 is your best year in business, both from a project perspective, but most importantly, financially. For everyone who books in a demonstration before the end of 2023, we will extend the free trial period so that even if you are madly wrapping up projects, you will still have plenty of time to become familiar with More Time to Design and be ready to start 2024 with a bang. I will pop the link to book in a demonstration in the show notes. Thank you for listening to this design dialogue. I hope you have found it full of inspiration and helpful information to take into your design studio. If you like the podcast and want to hear more, consider sharing it or writing a review, as it helps us reach more people, and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you would like to unlock the power of effortless studio management and elevate your design business to new heights, please follow the links in our show notes to see how More Time to Design can help you build a better business. Have a great week, and I will see you for our next design dialogue.